A very good morning to all the students of class 12th political science, and students, welcome back to the online classes here. And as you know, we were doing the second chapter of your book, that is the contemporary world politics, and the name of the chapter is the end of bipolarity. So we have completed all the content which is there in the NCRT book. But now, after completing that, we have certain additional topics which have been added for this particular session of 2021 and 22 to your syllabus. It means that is a revised syllabus for you. So I shall be now taking up the new topics which has been added to the second chapter. But the thing which you have to remember is your chapter number 3 has been cut down from the new syllabus. Okay, but that topics of that third chapter has been merged with chapter number 2, and those are the topics now I am going to take within chapter number 2. So you don't have to be confused that why the topics of chapter number 3 I am taking under chapter 2. So because it is the new revised syllabus, we are some important topics of chapter number 3, that is US hegemony in the world politics, that has been now merged with chapter number 2, that is the end of the bipolarity. Along with it, there are certain two new topics also. For that I shall be providing you the notes. So today in this particular lecture I shall be taking the topic from the third chapter. Although the third chapter is being deleted, I have told you, but we have to study it under chapter 2. And the topic which we will be taking today is unipolar world. Okay, we will discuss what do we understand by a unipolar world, and also at the end of the lecture we will be discussing about the first Gulf War or Operation Desert Storm. Okay, so now let's begin the lecture. A very good morning to all the students of class 12th political science. And students, as you know, we were doing the second chapter, that is the end of the bipolarity of your first part, that is the contemporary world politics. And this second chapter we had already completed for according to your NCRT book only. As you can see, these four are the new contents according to the new revised syllabus for the session 21 and 22. So for this particular session, this is going to be the content for the entire chapter number 2. And if you see your NCRT book, so till now we have covered only this part, that is disintegration of Soviet Union. Although this is just a single topic under this new syllabus, but to understand disintegration of Soviet Union, I had taught you the complete chapter of NCRT, that is chapter number 2, in which we had covered what was Soviet system in detail. Then I told you about Gorbachev and his disintegration, and why did the Soviet Union disintegrate, as it was one of the superpowers after the Second World War. So we saw some of the important factors which led to the disintegration of Soviet Union. Then we saw what were the consequences and the outcomes of this disintegration. Okay, and in the last video we had discussed something about shock therapy and its consequences. Okay, so these were the important topics just we had studied to understand this complete topic, disintegration of Soviet Union. And I hope that if any question comes from this topic, you will be easily able to answer that, because I have covered entire chapter just to teach you this topic. Okay, so now the important thing is here, why I'm discussing these contents. According to the new revised syllabus, you have to now include some of these topic into chapter number 2. So as you know, this unipolar world, US hegemony in the world politics. Okay, so now we have to cover this topic, unipolar world. This is not the topic, this is the third chapter basically I have mentioned here. This is not mentioned in the contents, but I have written it down here because this topic, unipolar world, we have to study it from the third chapter of your book, because the third chapter from your NCRT book has been deleted, but the content of this third chapter, US hegemony in the world politics, the contents and the topics of this chapter has been added to chapter number 2. So you have to keep in mind that chapter number 2, that is the end of the bipolarity, it has combined some topics of US hegemony in the world politics. Otherwise this chapter has been deleted, and 3 or 4 important topics of this chapter has been added to second chapter. As in this chapter we will be studying unipolar world, Middle East crisis, Afghanistan, Gulf War is a part of this chapter, US hegemony. Then this is the new topic, democratic and democratization, CIS, Commonwealth of International States, and 21st century Arab Spring. So one by one, these are one or two are the new topics which is not there in your book. I shall be providing you the notes for that, but some topics are from this chapter which we will merge with chapter number 2. So don't be confused. From today I am starting the new topics which are included in chapter number 2. Okay, that is I am starting with unipolar world, which is a part of third chapter, US hegemony, but this chapter has been deleted. I hope you have understood. So I'm starting with unipolar world today. Okay, so here we will try to understand the meaning of hegemony. Although this topic, US hegemony in the world politics, which was the third chapter of your NCRT book, has been deleted, but some part of this chapter has been added to chapter number 2, and the topic is unipolar world. So we have to understand unipolar world. What do we understand by unipolar world? It means it is the same thing, meaning of hegemony. We have to understand the meaning of hegemony and unipolar world. Almost they are the one and the same thing, just they have changed the name. Instead of hegemony, they have mentioned unipolar world. Okay, by unipolar you can easily understand. Previously during the Cold War era, we were having two poles. One was US and the other pole was USSR. But after the disintegration of USSR in 1991, now we were left with only one pole, and this pole was called unipolar. Okay, so it means that all the political, social, economic dominance around the world was led by US. So US was showing its dominance around the world in all the world affairs. So that is why we are reading this topic, unipolar world. That is what happened after the disintegration of USSR. So the world was left with only one superpower, and it was dominating and influencing all the activities at the world level, at the world politics. So that is why we call that particular period as unipolar world, where the world was ruled and controlled and dominated by only one superpower, that was US. So let's understand the meaning of hegemony here. So, the meaning of hegemony: leadership or dominance, especially by one state or the social group over the others. Leadership or the dominance shown by one state over the other social groups or others. Okay, so that one state was US, and US was showing its leadership and dominance over the social groups, means over the world, over the whole world, economically, politically, socially, it was showing its dominance. So, this is the meaning of hegemony or the unipolar world. Another definition is also mentioned here. You can see the position of being the strongest. If I say who is a hegemony, or the if we talk about a unipolar world, it means this unipolar world means it was the position of US, where US was being the strongest and the most powerful, and therefore able to control others. Since it was very strong and it was very powerful, it was dominating politically, socially, economically. So it was very easy for US to control everyone easily. So that is why we were saying that there was that period after the disintegration of Soviet Union, that was the time period which we called as unipolar world or the US hegemony, or you can also say US hegemony. Okay, or the unipolar world. So you need to understand the meaning of. So this is now the part from your NCRT book, and this page number is 32. So from this particular chapter we have to do this topic, beginning of the new world order. So now you can understand beginning of the new world order. It means after the disintegration of USSR, now the world was left only with one superpower, that was US. That is why we are saying now there was a beginning of the new world order, and that world was dominated and led by US as the only superpower. So it's written here, we can read it from your NCRT book. The sudden collapse of Soviet Union took everyone by surprise. Okay, this was a surprise for everyone, although there were a lot of internal weaknesses and many factors which led to the disintegration. But still it was shocking and surprising, because such a big superpower, which was equally challenging the power of US, how could such a important powerful nation could disintegrate? So this was like a shock to everyone and surprise. While one of the two superpowers ceased to exist and the other remained with all its power. One was seized and disintegrated and collapsed, but on the other hand, the other power was intact, that was US, even enhanced, even became more powerful now. Thus, it would appear that the US hegemony began in 1991. Now, we would think that since USSR disintegrated in USSR and now the Cold War had ended, there was no rivalries, no competition. It means we will think that the US hegemony or the US dominance or the unipolar world, this mechanism started from 1991. Of course we'll think that when USSR was no more in the scene, after that US became the most powerful. Okay, but that is not true. After Soviet power disappeared from the international scene, this is largely correct. We would say this is largely correct, but we need to keep in mind two riders of this. almost, if you think, this is correct, that when USSR disintegrated, the US became the most and the sole superpower which was dominating around the world, all the world politics. But in mind, we also have to keep two riders of this. First, as we shall see in this chapter, so in this topic, we'll see some aspects of US hegemony did not emerge in 1991. So in this chapter, we'll try to cover some of the topics in which we'll realize that US hegemony or the unipolar world did not start from 1991, but in fact go back to the end of Second World War. But if we will think deeply, and we'll go back to the end of the Second World War, and I have explained you that what happened in 1945, where the US had dropped bombs on Japan. So see what's written. The US did not start behaving like a hegemonic power right from 1991. It became clear much later, after the world was in fact living the period of hegemony. It means we were already living in a period of hegemony since 1945, as US had shown its atomic power and energy and military power during the Second World War when it dropped the bombs on Japan. Okay, but still, let us therefore look at this process by US hegemony got established more closely. But more importantly, we saw and we realized that its real hegemonic power started after 1991. But just exactly after 1991, it did not started behaving like a hegemon, but slowly and gradually, its activities and various incidents made people realize around the world that they were already living under a hegemonic world. So we are going to discuss in the further topic regarding few of the important incidents, okay, in which US is a major part, and we will understand that how we were living under a hegemonic world after 1991, how US was showing its the military, political, economic dominance in various parts of the world, how it was involved in so many incidents. Okay, so since we are trying to understand how US hegemony was going on, and we are talking about the unipolar world after the disintegration of Soviet Union, so under that, if you have to understand the hegemony and dominance of US in the various events around the world, this topic has been taken from an NCERT book, that is the invasion of Kuwait or the first Gulf War. When I had shown you the contents, that what are the topics, extra topics we are going to cover under chapter number 2. So this is the topic which have been added to chapter number 2 from chapter 3, the first Gulf War, that was the invasion of the Kuwait. I shall be doing this in detail from your NCERT book, but I wanted to show you the map here. Okay, so this is the middle east, we would say, or the western Asia, western part of Asia, where these are the Arab countries. You can see Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. These are the petrol producing countries. Okay, and this there was a war between Iraq and Iran, which was here. Iran was supported by USSR, and Iraq was supported by US. And Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq from 1979 to 2003. Okay, and this is Kuwait. You can see they have a common boundary, and Iraq is having a common boundary with Kuwait, and Kuwait is also a petrol producing country. Okay, and this is Saudi Arabia, this is Israel. So you should keep these locations in mind when we will be discussing invasion of Kuwait, first Gulf War. These things you need not to understand, this is the extra content I have written, but you just need to know the location. Here is Iraq, here is Kuwait. Okay, and these are the petrol producing countries, and there was a conflict amongst these countries, okay, as they were the neighboring countries, but there were a lot of conflicts relating to boundary issues between Iran and Iraq, and relating to petrol and drilling of petrol between Iraq and Kuwait. And Saudi Arabia was also was a supporter of Kuwait. So let's see what was going on in this region, and how US intervened in the politics of, or the conflicts of these places. We'll see that. So now you can see here we are talking about the topic, that is invasion of Kuwait. So in August 1990, remember the date please. In August 1990, that is during the disintegration of USSR, Iraq invaded Kuwait. Now I had shown you the location of Iraq and Kuwait, how they are the neighboring countries and they share the common boundary. So now Iraq, as it was a powerful country as compared to Kuwait, so Iraq invaded, tried to control and invade Kuwait, rapidly occupying and subsequently annexing it. So finally, they occupied the entire nation, that is Kuwait, and annexed it. Okay, and now Now, after a series of diplomatic attempts failed at convincing Iraq to quit its aggression. Now you can read this again. After a series of diplomatic attempts, there were a lot of diplomatic attempts made to convince Iraq that it should quit and leave the control and the occupancy over Kuwait, and it should give freedom to Kuwait. Okay, there were a lot of talks done by the United Nations. So as we know, United Nations is an international body which tries to maintain peace and decorum around the world. So it was the responsibility of United Nations to convince Iraq to free Kuwait. But what happened? It failed. The attempts made by United Nations to convince Iraq to free Kuwait failed. So what happened? Now the United Nations mandated the liberation of Kuwait. Now the United Nations had mandated, it became very important and mandated that now we have to liberate Kuwait by force. Now we'll have to use our force to give liberation and to give freedom to Kuwait from the rule of Iraq. So for the UN, this was a dramatic decision after years of deadlock during the Cold War. So since 1945 till 1990s, there was no action or the no use of military was done by United Nations. But after the Cold War, this was the first time after a long period of time of Cold War. Now United Nations came into action as Iraq was not ready to give freedom to Kuwait. So here what happened, the US President George H.W. Bush. Now you have to remember the US President was H.W. Bush. We are not talking about UN. Now United Nations were trying to liberate Kuwait by force, but at this moment during the period of 1990s, you have to remember the United States President was George H.W. Bush, hailed the emergence of a new world order. Now he started a new world order. As we know, this was a time period where we were living under a unipolar world where was a dominance of US. Now US interfered into this situation, and it took over to this situation, and a massive coalition force of 6,60,000 troops from 34 countries. Now you have to remember this data. There was a huge coalition of armies was made in which 6,60,000 troops from 34 countries fought against Iraq. So all these 34 countries were against Iraq. So they were fighting against Iraq, and the total number of troops was 6,60,000. So all these countries defeated it, and it what came to be known as the first Gulf War. So now Iraq was defeated. Iraq had to free Kuwait now. So this war and this disturbance was called the first Gulf War. So if questions comes for the first Gulf War, you will have to mention this invasion of Kuwait, or the how Iraq invaded Kuwait, and how UN started a program, and how what was the role of US under this program. But now if we will study further, after that we had studied about first Gulf War, what happened, this operation, UN operation, which was called Operation Desert Storm. So this first Gulf War, the operation which was started by UN, the operation's name was Operation Desert Storm, to liberate Kuwait from the rule of Iraq. So the operation which was started, as I told you, there were 34 countries and 6,60,000 troops. So this entire operation was started by UN, and this operation name was Operation Desert Storm. So maybe there will be a question not asking about the first Gulf War exactly, but they will be asking what do you understand by the Operation Desert Storm. It means it is one and the same thing. You will have to explain about the first Gulf War. So was overwhelmingly American. So they are saying UN had started this operation which was called Operation Desert Storm, was overwhelmingly American, but this operation was totally dominated by America, US, an American general. So an American general, Norman Sechwerkoof, led the UN coalition. So you can see who was leading this coalition. UN had started this program, and who was leading all the troops here was a general of America, Norman Sechwerkoof, and nearly 75% of the coalition forces were from US. So as we are saying, there were 6,60,000 troops. So out of those 6,60,000 troops, 75% of the troops were from the US Army. Although the Iraqi president Saddam Hussein had promised the mother of all battles, the Iraqi forces were quickly defeated. Although Iraqi president Saddam Hussein, as I told you, he was the president of Iraq at that time, and he had promised that this war is going to be the mother of all battles. It means this war is going to be a very strong. It means they will be very strong against all this coalition, but they were easily defeated and quickly defeated by the forces led by the UN operation, and basically it was led by America, as most of the troops, around 75% of the troops, were of America. So here we are trying to show that although in the world affairs UN was the most important international body, but US was dominating even UN. Here this operation was Operation Desert Storm was started by UN, but the leader of that operation was America, where 75% of the forces were from America. Okay, even the general of an American general, Norman Suchwen, he led this coalition of armies. Okay, so the first Gulf War revealed vast technological gaps. So what do we understand after reading and understanding first Gulf War, or we can say Operation Desert Storm? It made clear to the world that there is a lot of technological gap that had opened up between US military capabilities and that of the other states. So in terms of military power and technology, there was a huge gap which was visible during the first Gulf War. How? The highly publicized use of so-called smart bombs. Now US, United States had used the bombs which are called smart bombs by the US, led some observer to call this a computer war. Many of the people around who were observing this first Gulf War or the Operation Desert Storm, they called it as the computer war, as on the click of the buttons there were smart bombs, okay, which were making lot of destructions in the to the army of Iraq. Here widespread television coverage also made it a video game. So it was a live war where people were sitting in their comfortable in their drawing rooms and watching the destruction of Kuwait army from their drawing room. So it was like a video game war. So people realized that how the technological and power and dominance of US has increased in terms of military, and there is so much of gap between US technology and US military and power as compared to the other countries around the world. There was a huge gap. So people could only realize because America had participated in this first Gulf War, and it was leading this coalition of UN here. So you can see here, this operation was won by the US due to the vast technological gap between US military capabilities and other states. If we talk about the technological gap with the US and other countries around the world, they use smart bombs. It was a video game war, as you saw. People were sitting in their drawing rooms and seeing the destructions of Iraq army, and it was a computer war because on a click of a button there was a use of smart bombs. Okay, and US made profit out of war. In fact, US using so much of technology, but still they made profit out of this war, economic gains in terms of its economy. Okay, let's see. Germany, Japan, and Saudi Arabia, they had to pay some amount to the army and the military of US, okay, as they were a part and allies of US, which was leading this coalition against Iraq. So this was the which part of first Gulf War. Also we can say invasion of Kuwait or Desert Storm, Operation Desert Storm. So you have to understand this topic properly. This is the part which has been included to chapter number 2 from chapter number 3. Okay, next topic we shall be taking in the next part. Till then, thank you.